Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm coming to you on location from Orlando, Florida, where my family is at Disney Animal Kingdom, and I am in the hotel room talking to these two guys. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Hey, man. Hello from not Disney World.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll be kind of.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I'll be kind of living that life later this week. Take the family down to Florida so they can go have spring break.
Well, I'll have to mute out this part so when my wife listens to the podcast later, a couple days in a park, couple days working from the hotel room. That's probably a decent balance because, well, you know what happens when you're out doing the family stuff all the time.
Yes.
No, I'm just fortunate to have a healthy family where we can go enjoy stuff like this stuff, and still got a show must go on, right? I've been at the park for 3 days. It's time to work a little bit.
Nice.
So got Harvey Green. I almost called you Harvey Cox and Jirah Green. I'm on vacation.
With our powers combined.
Right.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Wonder Twin powers activate. Form of never mind. All right, so Harvey and Jirah, we actually discovered something a few minutes ago that I did not realize. Actually, I probably realized it a couple of days ago. We've been covering the Nutanix corporate blogs. Some of them can be marketing and fluffy, and we decided we needed some deeper content, so we went after the community blogs. And man, did we find content over here! So we're going to be mixing those in from time to time. Jirah, any insight on the Nutanix community and how that has been beneficial to Nutanix, the company?
Yeah, for sure. It's our hosted tech community called Next, and where new to a couple of us here, right? That our staff even blog here as well, right? So the community can write their own stuff. Our tech folks can join them as well, and fantastic place to get some more content.
And I guess the marketing guys view it from afar.
A lot of these people I've seen here actually are in our tech marketing, so they're really smart guys, folks.
Well, and what I meant by that was your traditional marketing folks, but yeah, tech marketing, a lot of those are the cream of the crop people that rose up through the world and decided to take a different path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Harvey, we, in several areas of the country where XenTegra is physically located, we need to probably get involved more in the Nutanix communities. That's something we should probably take a more active interest in. I know it's happening. Pandemic probably slowed a lot of it down, but hopefully it's going to come back around.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I mean, it only helps for everybody in the community when you actually put something in it. So. The more we can do there, the better it'll be. And I mean, the same for the community to us too.
So the blog title is Nutanix Files 4.0 New Features, Performance Improvements. It's by M. McGee. Jirah, you know who that is?
Yeah, Mike McGee. He's on our Files tech marketing team.
Okay. So, and I should apologize now for my microphone. If it's not great, I'm improvising here on the road. And I did everything I could not to pack anything more than I had to. So not a single headset went with me, which in hindsight might have been a bad idea.
You sound okay. You're okay.
I got all my clothes and my technology into this one bag, and then my wife walks out with 2 suitcases, and the whole goal was not to check luggage. So I had to sneak onto the plane with 2 bags. I got hyper converged only to get 3-tier back when it was time to get on the plane. I don't know, that makes sense. 2-tier at least.
Right.
All right, so this blog, Mike McGee, there's 4 topics that he specifically brings up, and I want to bring up something real quick. We do a lot with hyperconverged XenTegra. It's about all we do is hyperconverged, and there's lots of things around the I/O of the data and the redundancy of it, and the ability to make it redundant in multiple data centers through multiple clusters, even into the cloud. That's all extremely important. And you can do that with other technologies, but what you can't do with other technologies, other than Nutanix really, is this files piece. And that is super important for workloads, one of which we spend a lot of times with, which is the end user compute, VDI, virtual desktop, virtual app space. probably number one complaint in our space for forever was slow login times, and people really just got used to it. They really just got to a point where they just accepted it, and it didn't have to be that way. And files and having that data local, and now with FS Logics and the mounting of those containers real time, a lot of that's been improved by improving the technology, improving the architecture, and Nutanix is just absolutely perfect for the files piece of a hyperconverged solution. So the four bullets that are actually called out here is improved synchronous random write performance. That one's over my head, so that one's going to go to Jirah. CPU scheduling with NFS, flow control and Nutanix volumes, and pushing the performance envelope. So we'll start with the first one, Jirah. This improving synchronous random write performance. How is that elevating what files can do for a customer?
So it refers to on the back end of the file system as it's actually writing user data to disk, right, within the files file system, because it has its own file system that runs back in the back of the behind the scenes there. The way that it can use the fastest tier of storage, like for example Optane, to do the logging as to what writes occur, that translates into more end user perceivable write performance. So the way that we can intelligently use, which is kind of the whole benefit of files in general, right, is that ability to intelligently place the hottest data where it needs to go for the fastest end user experience. So bringing that now to the actual logs of the file system itself on the back end.
I never really thought about this, but so if I'm working within a VM and I'm writing to the virtual disk, I'm writing through the Nutanix file system. And that's happening, that's that single layer, right, where it's writing to disk, and then it's writing somewhere else to disk. And at that point, it officially tells the system it's been written, right? If I have RF of 1.
So we do that for RF of 2, yeah, right, 2 copies.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we do that for all data everywhere, right? But in this case, also it refers to files itself runs the virtual FSVMs that are the front end, and then it also uses block storage on the back end, and it uses a file system on top of those block devices to actually store the NFS or SMB data. So there's a separate level of logging that goes on there as well.
Yeah, so there's an extra system in place here, and this is really giving performance underneath that system so that it becomes less and less of a constraint, even though it probably wasn't much of a constraint before. But when you're talking about heavy writes and reads, or writes in this case, every little bit helps.
Totally. Well, and this one also is a performance needle mover for CA shares, right? So continuous availability, where I can tell the FSVMs, hey, do more work, be more in lockstep. But then if an FSVM goes down, the end user doesn't even perceive a failover there, right? The data is immediately live on the next FSVM. Mm-hmm. So even more availability, and now with more performance.
Right. Never asked this question to anyone. Maybe you get it all the time, maybe you don't, but and maybe I'm just an idiot here. So this is NFS, as in network file system, or this is like SMB Windows files, or all the above?
File supports both.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it supports SMB, NFS, or also a dual presentation, right? I want SMB and NFS for the same data set.
My role in this podcast is do the introductions and ask dumb questions.
No, all good. It's a great question. So it's all about the use case, right? So SMB, very common in the Windows world, right? A lot of shared drives, map drive, profile drives. NFS in general, more common in the Linux world, application storage and data logging, all that kind of stuff. But, for some customers, for some environments, you need both, right? I need to write it from one system, read it from the other. Maybe an application that logs it under one protocol, but then my analytics picks it up over the other protocol, and I want to do an analysis on it, or big data crunching. So there can be a use case for the dual presentation as well, the multi-protocol.
All right, Harvey, for extra credit, SMB stands for? Yeah, got him.
Server message block. I heard him say it. He said it, server message block.
I don't even think it's that. I think it's small message block, isn't it?
This is what people tune in for, is Jirah Googling things.
Right.
SMB acronym.
Wow. Yep, you definitely caught me today.
You get it? Small message block, right? That was the Microsoft secret sauce.
I see server message block.
Oh no. They must have changed it.
Please hold while I wade through all of the small to medium business results.
Right. Yeah, I'm seeing server message block.
See, there we go. See, I learned something. I thought I was gonna trick somebody. I ended up learning something.
Yeah, server message block. Yes.
Yes. And I think the Microsoft implementation, so server message block, and then the Microsoft implementation of it is CIFS.
Yeah.
Common
Yes.
Information, Common something Internet File System.
Yes.
Got me there. I'll trust you on that one.
I think that's what it's called. Now you got to Google that one. All right. Well, and so I thought about that because the actual paragraph ends with continuous availability, and they came up with an acronym for that too. I mean, is that California? What is that?
Non-compliant, right? It's a 2-letter acronym compared to our typical tech 3-letter acronyms.
Do we have to give everything an acronym?
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking about your fingers, right? You got a limited number of keystrokes in your lifetime, right? So you got to spend them wisely.
Yeah. The problem with acronyms everywhere is then other people use them and then don't have any idea what they mean. And then next thing you know, we just live in a world where it's acronym and we just talk as if we're texting each other all over the place.
Next thing you know, you're hearing about small message blocks and we're just lost.
All right, next topic is CPU scheduling with NFS, which stands for Network File System, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, pop quiz. What does SAN stand for then?
Storage area network.
Yeah.
Storage area network. I'll never forget the first time that came up. I went running and told my boss how we needed to buy a SAN. He said, "Great, I can afford the SAN. Who's going to pay for the network?" I'm like, "What network?" Oh, now I get it. Yeah. We just went back to the IBM Shark.
Sure.
What is Shark?
It was some IBM proprietary thing that our Unix team loved.
Wow. I don't know. You're making me feel like either I'm off or I don't know what's going on today. Maybe I need some caffeine for once.
Well, if you never worked in a big time Unix IBM shop, you would have no reason to know what these are. And even at the time, they were probably 15 years old and antiquated. All right, CPU scheduling. Harvey, you want to take this one?
Sure. So this one is around improvements that they made to how the CPUs are actually utilized when you're using the NFS protocol. Lots of IOPS back and forth for NFS was leading to high CPU usage. They've done some improvements around the way that it limits the locking and schedule contention around the processors, just to help out with the utilization there. And of course, for everybody listening, when your processors are happy and not overworked, things happen faster in your environment. So getting CPU usage down is definitely something that is a big help for those using NFS, and just being able to have more intensive workloads that you can take care of and actually just have less CPU usage overall. That also helps with being able to get some faster throughput through there, so you can have some additional IOs that are happening depending on what your workload is.
So should this one be CPU or vCPU? Where is this optimization happening?
So this optimization is happening. So I guess that's a great question. So if I back up a layer here, and we're talking about improvements that are made to Files, yes, Files is hosted by multiple virtual machines. And I'm sure, yes, we're talking about virtual machines, but at the same time that does back into CPU, the hardware CPU as well. So I don't think it's just referring to just the virtual CPU. I think that it's referring to the hardware CPU system clock as well. I guess let me toss to Jirah in case I'm saying the wrong thing.
No, you're spot on. So Files is an application that you can enable within the Nutanix platform runs as a virtualized application within VMs that you can just see in Prism or in vCenter. And those VMs, of course, are multiple vCPU based on your sizing and throughput, which means that Files is therefore a multi-CPU distributed app that runs within those FSVMs. So this refers to, my read is efficiency on the code that runs within those FSVMs, letting it, you do more work per tick, right, per cycle. So for without growing the size of those FSVMs, in this case, one test showing double the number of NFS-based IOPS. So more throughput, more work done without needing to allocate more vCPU to those virtual file servers.
I was having a conversation with a guy earlier today. He's like a CIO at a 30,000 employee company, and they decided, hey, this VDI thing is what we need to do. And they went to their integrator overseas, their managed service provider, and said, we want to, triple our VDI users and get really powerful virtual desktops. And they were shocked at what it was going to cost. And they really hadn't built that into their initial offering and thought that it was just going to be included as part of the initial offering. And what the managed service provider that hosts their workloads told them, they would get incremental upgrades. Well, incremental upgrades means we're going to patch, not we're going to make it better. And things like what you guys are doing here is going to help compensate for the lack of newer, faster hardware. You're getting smarter through software. And actually did ask him in the conversation, hey, is Nutanix software or hardware? And after we talked through it a little bit, well, obviously it's software. And software just continuously making that underlying platform, whatever it is, smarter, faster.
Yes. Continuous improvement.
It's like Harvey has a Tesla and it gets smarter every time he gets an update and hopefully more secure.
Dang right.
Just needs new tires occasionally. There's a physical layer that can't be overlooked.
That is 100% true.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know when it should be like software-defined tires. That'd be pretty cool.
I think software-defined tires would be known as floating.
I mean, sounds awesome.
Yes.
All right, next one here is flow control with Nutanix volumes. Jirah.
So this describes an enhancement about how, again, those front end, the virtual file system, virtual filers, virtual file servers send data back into the cluster itself. So the backend data is stored in Nutanix volumes, which is our iSCSI block-based storage, and all of the file servers in the front mount all of the various volumes in the back. And so with adding flow control to that, working on some of the iSCSI queuing, it lets this new version of Files 4.0 handle more bursty workloads, and it calls out large storage queues as well. So we can more rapidly ingest data on the front end, get it back to the back end, and get that stored even more quickly. So good to streamline that and let the whole system run faster.
Are we any thoughts on this one? Nope. I mean, I think Jirah hit it as well as he can hit it.
We're all probably fans of faster.
Yes, for sure.
and the other cool thing to call out, all of these enhancements, right, are things you would just get with a one-click software update, right? So if you're running an old version of Files, you tell Nutanix, specifically LCM, right, just scan for what else is out there that's new. And you can say, hey, you're on Files version X and Files version Y is available. Click here to upgrade, and that upgrade's all automated for you, all through the LCM logic and automation engine. So you just get all this goodness that we're talking about here.
I've never really thought about this, but based on this, could Nutanix's iSCSI implementation be the third tier in a three-tiered storage solution?
As a protocol, sure, it's iSCSI, right? You've heard about it all day, every day, elsewhere. It's the same iSCSI that we know and love, question mark, don't love.
Well, you're going to see what the acronym stands for.
In this iSCSI, the internet, what is SCSI? This is what people tune in for. Listen to Jirah.
Let's start with what is SCSI. I love that. What is SCSI? Because, right, we used to have SAS and SCSI drives.
Serial connected.
Serial connector, serial interface? why don't I remember these off the top of my head anymore? I guess because they're not, I don't talk about them as much.
Small
Remember when
computer
you
system interface. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't have gotten there today.
remember
Small
when you used to buy a
computers.
server and you had to decide, are you going to put SCSI or SAS? And if you put, excuse me, not
Yes,
SCSI
I
or
do
SAS,
remember that.
yeah, SAS. And if you put anything other than SCSI, all the other network server administrators look down on you.
I do remember that.
Costs like $4,000 more.
And I got the I right. The Internet Small Computer Systems Interface, which I would say at this point has zero correlation whatsoever to any modern usage of iSCSI. It's not for small
No,
systems. It's not over the internet. I
no.
guess it's an interface, but what's not an interface?
Well, by internet, they mean internet protocol like TCP/IP is internet protocol, even though you're not going across the internet.
I mean, yeah, but that would almost argue more for like calling it like LSCSI, like LAN SCSI. I'm not really improving it here, but like even just the what a way to like carbon date a term by itself. Computer system, like two words we haven't put together in a decade.
Well, maybe Steve Jobs. Everybody's just copying. Remember, everybody was copying Steve Jobs for a while. I this and I that. I mean, I almost called it XenTegra. I'm sorry.
Now I'm curious about when iSCSI was launched and patented.
Oh, it's been a while.
IBM Cisco in 1998, a draft standard in March 2000. So yeah, that checks out. It's around the I everything time frame.
Yeah, my first 3-tier conversation was a iSCSI SAN is what they were proposing to me.
The iPod launched in 2001. Yeah. Math checks out.
I think I lost the answer to the question.
To
So
your, you stole your own answer. It is iSCSI today. It's not a VASTA certified, the VMware array for storage offload certified provider for vSphere systems. So you wouldn't really want to use it as a non-VASTA certified storage provider for part of a 3-tier design.
So what is an example of a use case where you would connect to it? I've got an idea in my head, but I'll ask you the question.
There's an interop matrix on the Nutanix portal for the validated client systems, but basically, broad swath of Windows Server, Linux Server. Of course, we use it ourselves for files. Actually, even like the back end of like PC and some other systems all use it as well. So whenever we want to have like a separate data disk attached to a virtual machine, Volumes is a great choice for that. So usually it'll connect to in-guest systems like Windows and Linux rather than connect to like an external hypervisor.
So when you're building that Exchange cluster and you want, no, never mind.
No, Exchange cluster, I mean, they're still a thing, right? Once in a blue moon, you find them. SQL Server that needs, 10, 12 disks or so for a performant design. Also like healthy, like log drive, temp drive, data drive separation, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Sounds like the fun old days.
A lot of our systems actually automate it for you. So if you use like Era to deploy a VM for a database on Nutanix, Files does all those for you, by the way. Like there's systems that could set up like, I don't know, hundreds of volumes-based disks on a cluster and you would never even know about it.
Yeah.
I don't know, Jirah. That sounds a lot like automation.
It sounds like good automation. I might even say, yeah.
I do have to tell you guys that I did a virtual SAN project last week in my lab, and the minute I found my IQNs, they just showed up during a scan. I get so excited. It just worked. And I didn't have to go type them in or something. Flashbacks to the old days.
Again, limited keystrokes, right? You got to spend them well.
All right, the last one on here is pushing the performance envelope. Harvey, these graphs that you're going to talk through here a little bit are not Tesla graphs, so don't get too excited. But
they are not.
give us an example of what kind of performance results they're showing here with this release.
Yeah, so this is talking about, again, I guess under the umbrella of continuous improvement. In order for you to say you're continuously improving, you have to be able to compare what you're doing now versus what you were doing before you did it. So, they're going through and making sure that they're doing tests before and after any of these upgrades, so that when they say improvement, it's actually an improvement. I'm sure all of us have been through some update in our lives that was not actually an improvement. So they're just trying to test to make sure that they are actually making improvements. And so they've got some graphs on here to show the different ways that they were checking through storage. These tests, it says, were run through FIO to determine maximum throughput for each of the configurations of 1 node, 4 nodes, 8 nodes, 12 nodes, and 16 nodes. And they wanted to make sure that they see the capabilities of the cluster scaling up with the number of files nodes and the number of hardware nodes that they have. And so you can kind of see as they go through random read, random write, sequential read, and sequential write, that all of the graphs are going up and to the right, which is exactly what they want to see. Most of them are almost completely linear. So also, again, what they want to see, as you add more and more nodes to it, you should see kind of a linear uptick in their ability to perform. That's part of being able to scale up and have some reasonably good expectations. Yes, Andy, I see your hand is up.
Well, you just said scale up, and I think what you really meant, because hyperconverge is all about it, scale out.
Well, yes. So you've got yes, you're correct. So I'm looking through here, and I mean they specifically mentioned that they wanted to see the capability scale up, and then that baited me into saying scale up for you to bring that up. But yes, you're 100% correct.
Is it fair to say that whether you're scaling up or scaling out, whichever way you prefer, your benefit is going to still apply, and probably just the way in this linear fashion that you're seeing here?
Yeah, so that's the goal, right? They want to be able to prove that out, to be able to give you some realistic expectations of what things will look like as you add more hardware, or as you add more files nodes, so that you can have an expected predictability for being able to get performance out of your Nutanix Files deployment.
Yeah, it's pretty well understood commonly that Nutanix being a scale out platform, as you add more nodes, of course you get more capacity in the cluster, but also you get more throughput, right? More, we bring another storage controller to the party, it can do more IO, and everything just runs faster. So this is an important validation that I love that we are doing right with our release testing, is validating that the app as well that runs on the platform, in this case Files, also scales out and also brings more performance to the party when you scale it out that way. So good linearity there, and a good reminder, right, that if you've started with Nutanix and you had 1,000 VDI users and you double that to 2,000 users and everything's running great, fantastic. It could be worth looking at, hey, do you also want to add some more virtual file servers as well? Because you can also just one click expand those as well, and you'll bring more files throughput to the end user environment on top of all that.
And this is important, because going back to making fun of our 3-tier friends, that logic doesn't necessarily apply there, right?
Totally, right. There's not probably really a great way to start with fewer users and like less hardware. And then as you add more users, like I guess add more hardware, it often doesn't scale out quite as linearly. So you're left buying sort of like way more hardware than you need up front and using less of it, and hoping you grow into it and hoping that you don't grow past it and exceed it.
Yeah, from a 3-tier standpoint, that logic is still great until about 6 to 9 months after you bought it, when they come out with a new one. And then it's not so easy to just add.
And you may or may not get the software benefits of the new one, nor the hardware capacity.
Correct.
Yeah. All right.
Especially now when you order something and it might not show up for 6 to 9 months.
That's out of date before you even implement it.
Right.
Well, guys, that's the end of the blog here. I think this just further validates that Nutanix is a software company that's helping you get the most out of the hardware that you have and you're buying and you're scaling. And as you continue to take advantage of Moore's Law, you get continued benefits of smart software. And in this case, files specific. And in our world, whether it's application data, whether it's user profiles, whether it's the volume containers for app data local or what have you, whatever's going in that FS Logics partition. We had a meeting last week where somebody is moving from one system to the other, and in that case, they highlighted that it was FS Logics that enabled them to get much better results. And I'm like, well, that wasn't the fault of the previous software you were using, and you just need to use FS Logics all along. But to them, the result was they plugged in a new, smarter software solution and it all worked better. Therefore, it must be better. And that just goes along with the idea that, the underlying file system plays a big role. I use the example all the time of, you guys both remember when you went from your first spinning hard drive in a desktop or laptop to an SSD drive, you thought it was the best system ever. It was just more horsepower.
I would just sit there and reboot over and over again. Like, you want to see it again? Watch this.
I did that with a hypervisor run on NVMe the first time, and it booted in 4 seconds. And I showed my kids, they didn't get it. And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, they won't get it.
Well, all right, guys. Well, I appreciate you jumping on a Monday afternoon. I'll let you go back to hopefully wrapping up the day, and I'll go pick up my family from Animal Kingdom.
You have fun with that, sir.
Yeah, you enjoy.
All right.
Talk to y'all.
Thanks.